series called Leftovers. But before we get into that, just so you know that we've only got one more week of the series Leftovers. That'll be next week, and it'll be all about crummy people. And if you've been waiting to hear about crummy people, next week is going to be the week where we're going to talk all about it, right? And don't point at them if they're sitting next to you, but just show up next week for crummy people. But so in 2 weeks from now, we're going to start a new series called Snake Oil, where sometimes we get something what it's not what it's promised to be, where it's not what we expect, and someone sold us a lie about something that says, I got this that'll cure your baldness, and you're like, sweet, and I'll rub that on my head, and 3 months later, you lose even more hair, and what's left turns purple, right? So, it's not what you were expecting, right? You've been sold a vial of snake oil. And then following that, so that'll be all of next month, August. September will put us into the Son of Jesse, where we're going to take snapshots of King David's life for I don't know how many weeks are in September, 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it comes out to be. We'll do that for September. Then October comes around, and we'll be in a series called Church Monsters, which will be, it'll help me as I continue to write this book about church monsters, and so it'll help me focus and get my research done. But it'll be good because it's October and it's all about monsters and free candy from your neighbors, right? So that's awesome. But this week, so we'll finish off this week in Leftovers, and next week. So week number 1. We started this series called Leftovers, where Jesus fed at least 5,000 people who were following him as he was trying to get away from everybody so he could take a break, but they just followed him everywhere he went. And so he asked the disciples who were following him, he's like, hey, we need to feed these people. What do you got? And they're like, nothing, right? We can't feed these people. We ain't got no money to feed these people. It'll take us years to feed all these people. And Jesus is like, well, we're going to feed them bread and we're going to feed them fish from this little boy's lunch that one of you guys stole. And so that's what Jesus did, and he fed everybody, all 5,000 plus people, fed them, and then he had 12 baskets full of food left over, one for each of the disciples, to prove his sermon illustration that he is the bread of life. And he may have been asking a physical question, but there's also a spiritual side to it. And he said it's not just the food that these people are after, but it's the eternal life that they're looking for, and I have plenty of that left over for them. So then last week we talked about the 300, Gideon's 300, not the Spartan 300, but the original 300, who God took Gideon and walked him through this process where he had to figure out who he was and who God was. And during that process, God had to cut away his army and bring him down to just a handful of people. And with those handful of people, he did everything that God told him was going to happen in the first place through the promises, where he starts off with Gideon telling him that he's a mighty warrior, a mighty man of valor, and Gideon was stuck in the darkness. But at the end of it, we saw that Gideon finally revealed the light that was inside of him, breaking open the jars, worshiping God, and sent the enemy running in fear and terror, and so much so that the enemy killed himself, right? So that's what we talked about. Little did I know that this week God would prove to me that sermon illustration works still today, where he would cut away just to bring back the restoration of the church. But we'll just continue to pray for all those who are doing their booths and all that stuff at the fairs, and those who are sick and all that stuff. But that's so then that leaves us for next week. We'll talk about the crummy people. So this week is a bad hair day week. So we're going to be talking about Samson today. Samson. So a little bit on Samson. Samson is Manoah's son, and he's from the tribe of Dan, right? Which is a weird name for a tribe, like you're Dan's tribe, right? So it's not even a cool name, like you're part of the Apaches, right? You're Dan, you're Dan's tribe. His mother. Her name is never given in the Bible, so we don't even know her name. But she had been barren for a while, and she started praying. She really wants a son. She really wants, because that's how you continue the lineage. Even it's not as important in our culture today here in America, but it's still important to where if a woman does not produce a child for the husband, they start to feel like their failure is inadequate, that there's something wrong with them because they're not continuing on with what they're designed to do, right? That's why there's that emptiness. She has the same problems, right? But even more so that they really need male children, because that's how you carry on the name and the legacy. It's not as important for us today, but it still is a little bit important because everyone wants their name to live forever, right? And that's through your children, and especially the male children, because they carry the name, right? Nothing against women, right? Just saying that's how it is, right? So she has this problem. So one day while she's praying, the angel of the Lord announced to her that she would have a son, and he was to become a Nazarite. So not only, he's from the tribe of Dan, but Jesus, well, we find out what is Jesus later, but Jesus comes down and he says, you're going to have a son, but he's going to be dedicated as a Nazarite. So a Nazarite is a person who is either chosen or consecrated to complete the vow of God. That's what makes a Nazarite. And they have to do this all their life, right? So they have a strict set of rules that they have to follow, which you can find in the Old Testament, where like Israel has rules. But the Nazarites have an extra set of rules because they're going to complete this vow to God. Like, this is going to happen because this is the way God has set it up. So one of the things is they're not to drink wine or strong drink. Other people can drink wine, but they can't get drunk. Nazarites don't even have the option, right? They have to be cut off. And these rules didn't just apply for Samson. Even though he's unborn, his mother had to abide by the same rules at the same time. But hers were, you can't eat grapes or drink wine. So that's what God told her. So she's even got more rules to go by. And the Nazarites cannot eat anything that is unclean. So poor Samson has never had a BLT. Right? Because bacon is unclean for the Nazarite people, right? Aren't you glad that you're not a Nazarite child? Like, you can have bacon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can have pork chops and honey ham, spiral cut, of course, right? We can eat the goodness of God, right? Isn't that awesome that we get to do that? So Samson can't have any of that stuff, right? And also, because he's a Nazarite, he's not allowed to cut his hair, right? And we know this, bro. How many of you heard the story of Samson before? Right? You know, the hair, we're going to get into the haircuts here in a minute, right? But he's not allowed to cut his hair because he's set apart from everyone else. He's supposed to be different from the normal Joe walking down the street. So, the mother, Samson's mother, comes to her husband, Noah, and she said, guess what? God said I'm going to be pregnant, and we're going to have a kid. And he's like, you're crazy, right? So, the angel shows up to both of them, and they start having this conversation, and finally, Dad comes around, and he's like, wow, that's awesome. So when we come to Judges chapter 13, verse 18, it says, so he starts asking, he's like, so we're going to build this altar, and when everything comes true, who are we supposed to give thanks to? And so he asked him, he asked the angel, what is your name? Verse 18, he says, why do you ask my name? The angel of the Lord replied. So this question comes up in the Bible periodically. Like, there's a lot of, like, all our Bible heroes, almost all of them will ask this same question, who do we call you? Moses, when he was talking to God, he didn't get an angel, he had a burning bush. I wore these shoes, no one at the bottom of it's all out. I keep tripping on it. Moses at the burning bush asked God, who do I tell them that has sent me? And God's response was, I am. And Moses looked at the bush. Because when we say, who are you? You would say, I am so-and-so. I am Amber, right? I am Aaliyah, I am Emily, I'm Alicia, I'm Cheyenne, I'm Sandy, I'm Kathy, I'm Steve, and Troy, right? So, you would go through all these things. So Moses says, who is this? Who's sending me? The bush. I am. Is that it? Right? God says, I am, right? And then when all the other people in the Bible, that most of them, they ask the question, what is your name? So God replies, and I'm not even sure if this is the only time in the Bible it says this because I didn't reference it yet, but he says, why do you ask my name? The angel of the Lord replied, it is too wonderful for you to understand. And as I was reading, I wasn't even going to put this scripture in there, but as I was going through it, I was reading, it's like, this part right here, it is too wonderful for you to understand. That still applies to the church today. That still applies to our life. Because we cannot comprehend how wonderful Jesus' name actually is. We think we do because God has done so much for us and God has saved us from sin and death. But do we truly understand how wonderful He is in our life? Because every breath that we have is a gift from God. And the fact that He would come down from heaven to earth is something that we cannot even imagine because we've never been to heaven. And for Him to say, I love you so much that even though you destroy my name, even though you turn your back on me, even though you do not know who I am, I still love you enough because I'm so wonderful, I'm going to come down and be the sacrifice that you need.
Amen.
Right? They don't even know how powerful this statement is when God's telling them. Because we don't even understand how wonderful He is. We may know His name now, but we don't understand how wonderful He truly is. Right? So anyway, Samson and women. Samson is a ladies' man. Right? He likes the ladies. The ladies like him too. Right? Samson's a little bit of a player, right? He knows how to sweet talk these women. But one of the key elements in the story of Samson is this dominance of women in his life. Ever since before he was born, women had an important role to play in his life because he had to be born of a mother, right? One. So when, right? That's obvious. So Samson, before he was born, the angel said, you're going to be pregnant, you're going to have a son, and mom and dad are like, okay, that's cool. Dad didn't believe, and mom's like, oh God, he's a moron. I don't know why I married this man, but I trust you. And finally, dad comes around to the promise, right? So she had an important role to play in his life, and then he has three others that are the backbone of this biblical account of his life. And most of his story is about these women, except for a short section where he's talking with a bunch of guys with his riddle. But most of it has to deal with women. So Samson's involvement with each of the three women, and we're not going to talk about his mother very much, but we're already past that. But they all lead to conflict with the Philistines. So Samson is a judge of Israel. Or like Gideon was a judge of Israel, Samson has been called to be a judge of Israel. So this conflict that he has is with the Philistines who have oppressed Israel. Right? They're controlling them. But however, since God's purpose for Samson was to use him to deliver Israel from the domination of the Philistines, this weakness that he has for women was the primary means for the strength God used to judge Israel. He was weak in the knees for the women. But God took his weakness and used it for his own strength to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Right? To fulfill God's promise. So the first woman that we come across in Samson's life is his wife. In Judges chapter 14, this is where we find out where Samson is old enough now, and he's looking for some women. So he finds this first one. One day, verse number 1, one day when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. Right? So he's walking down the street, and some girl's walking down the other side of the street, and she's like, hey. Right? Like she caught his eye, right? He did a double take. He was walking through the grocery store, and he took his basket back around the aisle again to get a look at her. Right? That's what Samson was doing. So he gets his groceries. When he returned home, verse number 2, he told his father and mother, a young Philistine woman. So she's not an old hag. She's a young Philistine woman who he should have no contact with, because she's part of the problem. Israel has an issue with dating Philistine women. God told them, don't do it. Time and time and time. They must have some good women in Philistine. They got to look good, because Israel is always going back to the Philistine women. God, it's not that God wants, to separate, the races and all that stuff. That has nothing to do with it. It's the fact that these women will always bring in the false gods, which will lead to them worshiping false gods, not the one true God. And God understands their heart and what's going to happen to them, so He says, stay away from these people. But Israel continues to bring them into the house. And Samson follows suit with Israel, which means he's not only is he a judge of Israel, but his judgments that he passes on Israel, everything that goes on in his life is a reflection of the spiritual side that Israel's going through. He sees a woman that catches his eye, who's a Philistine. She's a young lady. He says, this young lady, she caught my eye. I want to marry her. Samson, obviously you haven't read your Bible. Because God's already told Israel, don't do this. But he says, I want to marry her, which is exactly what Israel does all the time. Get her for me. He's a little demanding, isn't he? Like, if your son or daughter came up to you and said, I saw this sweet thing the other day and I want you to get her for me, I would look at Troy and say, you better go get her yourself and pursue her if that's what you want. I'm not doing it for you. I've already got a wife. I can't even hold on to her very much. So you need to go do your own thing, right? So this Samson is like, this is what I want. Go and get her for me. If your kids came to you and said that, you just slap them upside their head. Don't look at me like I'm crazy, right? You've lost your mind. His father and mother objected. Praise God, at least there's some sense in there. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe among all the Israelites you can marry? Obviously not, because I don't want any of these women. I want that woman, right? Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife? Because mom and dad don't understand the spiritual side of things yet. We'll come to all that stuff later. But Samson told his father, like he's ignoring his mom, because they're both there. He looks at his dad. He says, get her for me. She looks good to me. She is like on the swimsuit calendar, and that's who I want, right? Get her for me. So Samson went to her town, and he saw this Philistine woman who he wanted to marry, and the Lord was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. And in Samson's case, this occasion came through this Philistine woman. Right? So when him and his parents, so they relented, and obviously because they're going to get her to marry him. So they're all on their way to this town, and Samson for some reason is separated from his parents, and he's walking along by himself, and then there's a part in the story where all of a sudden a lion comes out to attack Samson. And then the Bible says the Spirit of the Lord, the strength came upon Samson, the Spirit of the Lord rested on him, gave him mighty strength. So he fought the lion with his bare hands, and he grabs the lion. This isn't Sunday school stuff, right? He grabs the lion, and he pulls the jaw apart, killing the lion. Right? How many of you seen King Kong? Like the new one with Jet Black, like the 6-hour one. Right? You remember when they got the dinosaurs in there, right? I don't know where the dinosaurs came from, but King Kong and dinosaurs, where the dinosaurs come in and King Kong takes the dinosaur and he rips the mountain and then he starts playing with it. Right? That's Samson, right? That's what he does to this lion. He kills the lion, And then he doesn't even tell his mom and dad what happened. He just continues on his journey like, that's no thing, right? And then he comes back later and he finds out that the bees had come in and made their home inside the lion. They start making honey and stuff inside the carcass of this lion. And he's like, that's awesome. I'm going to take some of that honey, and he eats some of the honey. And then he takes some of the honey and he gives it to his mom and dad, and they just continue on their way. And this is where Samson's riddle comes in. Let's see. So he makes this riddle. So he's going to go marry this woman, and like all these people show up, and Samson's like, hey, I got a riddle for you. If you answer the riddle, I'll give you like 30 pieces of clothing and all this stuff. But if you can't answer the riddle, you got to give it all to me, right? And all these men are like, and I'll give you till the end of this wedding to figure out this riddle. So he tells them the riddle, and they can't figure it out. And finally they come to the point where they're so frustrated because the wedding's about to end. They come to his wife, and they say, look, you better tell him what the answer to this riddle is, because you're making us look like morons showing up to your wedding, and we can't figure this thing out. So she finally comes around, and she starts talking to Samson to get him to reveal the secret. And so we'll pick it up right there. Verse 14, or chapter 14, verse 16. It says, so Samson's wife came to him in tears and said, you don't love me. You hate me. This is going to be the ongoing theme for Samson for the rest of his life. She was crying, because that's what women do. Right? They'll start throwing on the waterworks. You don't love me, right? You hate me. You have given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. We're supposed to be married. We're supposed to share everything, and you won't even tell me the answer. She didn't even know what the riddle was, right? She just starts crying into Samson, and he says, it's Samson, because he's a man. He says, I have not even given the answer to my father or mother. Why should I tell you? Right? Which is what men do, right? The one's like, why this? Don't worry about it. I got it. Right? So she cried whenever she was with him and kept it up for the rest of the celebration. Verse 17 says, at last, on the 7th day, he told her the answer. No, we'll stop right there. What day is it? The 7th day. Numbers are important in the Bible, right? 7 is the completion of God's word. Samson's about to undercut everything, right? On the 7th day, he told her the answer because she was tormenting him with her nagging. Right? This isn't the first time, or this isn't the only time this is in the Bible where it talks about nagging women, right? It says a husband who has a nagging wife is like a faucet that continues to drip, right? It's like having leaky pipes in your house, which irritates you to no end. So if you're a nagging wife, pray that you get over your nagging. And if you're wondering, am I a nagging wife? Ask your husband, he'll tell you. Then she explained the riddle. The Bible is so awesome. She explained the riddle to the young men. Verse 18. So before the sunset they're running out of time. Like they're coming to Samson and they're coming in just the nick of time with the answer. On the 7th day, the men of the town came to Samson with their answer. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson replied. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. Samson knew, they can't answer the question. So they came in and they answered the riddle. The lion and the honey was the answer. They gave the answer. Samson doesn't take that too well. He's pretty mad. Because he thought he was getting one over on all these men. He was going to make out like a bandit, get all these clothes and gold and all this stuff. And they came in and they solved his riddle. So Samson is not a moron. So obviously he knows where the answer came from. But he's mad. So verse number 19 says, then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to the town of Ashkelon, killed 30 men, took their belongings, and gave their clothes to the men who had solved his riddle. But Samson was furious about what had happened, and he went back to live with his father and mother. Now, the part of the story that just baffles my mind is not that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson and he killed all the men who answered his riddle, but he went to another town. So the poor Joe's just doing his own thing, and he kills 30 men from another town for a response that he got from a different town, right? I don't understand what the spiritual implication of that is. I didn't really pray. It just, one day I'll pray to God. Like, what is the deal with that, right? I don't know. But Samson goes to kill 30 innocent people to bring. Well, now I got it right. He kills 30 innocent people to bring back the treasure to give to those who answered his riddle. Christ was innocent. He came and paid the price for our wickedness and our deceit and our underhandedness. That's not in those, that's free. So Samson's mad. He goes home to live with his father and mother. Then finally he's like, I've had enough living at home. She's pretty good looking, so we're going to go consecrate our marriage, and I'm going to live my life. So he goes back to his wife's house, and he comes to her father. He's like, hey, I'm here to sleep with my wife so we can finalize this thing. But his father-in-law wouldn't let him into the tent. And he's like, well, I thought you hated her, so I gave her to your best man at the wedding, and she's married to him now. But she has a younger sister, right? So Samson, not only did he lose the bet, he's now lost his wife to his friend, right? He's not happy. So Samson said, this time, I cannot be, chapter 15, verse 3, this time I cannot be blamed for everything that I am going to do to you Philistines. That's just, alright. You've gone and done it now, and I'm not to be blamed for everything. I'm about to lay a whooping on you, and it's not even my fault. Right? So Samson hated animals. Verse number 4, he went out and caught 300 foxes. Then he tied their tails together, which already got PETA upset. Then he lit the tails on fire, sent them running through the fields. Samson hates animals. Right? That's verses 4. He gets 300 foxes. He ties their tails together in pairs. He fastens a torch to each pair of the tails. Verse number 5. He lit the torches on fire. The foxes ran through the grain fields of the Philistines. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and the uncut grain. He also destroyed the vineyards and the olive groves. Because the foxes are running through from the fire is spreading through the fields. The fox, you understand what's going on here, right? The foxes don't make it, just so you know. Right? They don't come out the end of the field like, we're free. Right? So Samson kills 300 foxes with fire, destroys all the grain, which is exactly what the Philistine and the Midianites were doing to Israel when Gideon came around on the scene, right? They were destroying everything that they had. Gideon's like, this ain't my fault. I'm burning it all down. Right? I was gonna say, who let the dogs out?
Oh gosh.
So, consequently, the Philistines figured out that Samson was the one who destroyed all their food and all their crops and all that. So what do? They got to get revenge on Samson, right? But they can't find Samson, so they go to his wife, who's married to this other guy. So what do? It's because Samson burned their fields. They burn his wife and his family, or her family, right? So they burn, and that makes Samson mad, right? So it's this big cycle that's going around and around and around. And so the Philistines burned his wife and her father in revenge. So Samson went out, and basically 3,000 men came against Samson, and Samson looks around and he sees there's this jawbone of a donkey laying on the ground. he picks that thing up, and he just kills 1,000 of the men that come to attack him, and they finally get tired of dying, so they all just kind of leave him to be, and he goes to live in a cave, right? So that's Samson's life. And, here, verse 15, or chapter 15, verse 16, then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, I have piled them in heaps. Talking about all the people he just whacked. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men. Samson's pretty proud of himself. Like, he's like, yeah, I got this, right? He did that, you know. When he finished, so verse number 17 is amazing. When he finished his boasting, when he was done being full of himself, when he's got tired of taking the credit for everything that God had just did, because it says the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and the Spirit of the Lord is the one who gave him his strength. And when he was done boasting about all the men that he had killed, he threw away the jawbone, and the place is named Jawbone Hill, right? Because of the jawbone. Verse 18. Samson, who was very demanding, was now very thirsty. Because he just got done killing 1,000 guys. He needs something to drink, right? He's wore out. He's tired. He can't even take credit for it no more. He's so tired. He cried out to the Lord, which is what he should have done in the first place. You have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. Right? Samson is maybe not as smart as we think he is. But we do the same thing. We pray the same prayers. When God does a great victory, you're like, thank you, Lord, that I'm awesome. But I'm thirsty. Right? Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans? Verse 19, so God calls water to gush out of the hollow in the ground. And Samson was revived as he drank. So this is a lot like when Moses struck the rock to feed Israel, the water that they so desperately wanted. Moses did it out of turn. He struck the rock, the water came out, the army was replenished, which is what they wanted, but it was not what God wanted. So Moses had to go up on the hill with God on their nice little nature walk. And God said, you see all that? That's what I'm giving to my children. But because you disobeyed me, you ain't leaving. God goes back to Israel. Moses stays up in the rocks, never to be seen or heard from again, right? Because God buried Moses up in the hills, right? When you go on a walk with God, you better make sure you pray. So, the spring came up, and God replenished him with the water that he drank. The spring of the one who cried out is, and that's where the place is now named, because Samson cried out for water. The spring came up, so it's the spring of the one who cried out, right? Because God answers prayer. God likes it when we worship Him, because that's what we're created to do, is to worship God. But He'll answer prayer. And Samson, even though his prayer was wrong, it was not spiritually correct, it should have been redone, but it doesn't matter, because God met Samson where Samson was. And it didn't matter how perfect Samson was, but it was how perfect God is. And even though Samson didn't realize what was going on yet, God still knew what was going on, and He refreshed Samson, because God's not done with the Philistines. He's only killed 1,000 with the jawbone, right? And burned all their food. And not everything that looks good to us is right for us. Because this woman looked good for Samson. He wanted this woman. But this woman was not right for Samson. And God used that weakness that He has for women to demonstrate His power over the Philistines, and how He is in charge of all this, and Samson goes on to judge Israel for another 20 years. But Samson's weakness for Philistine women continues on, just like it does for Israel. And it continues to create trouble for both him and the Philistines. So he went to the town of Gaza, where he became involved in a prostitute. So that brings us, so we've gone from Samson's wife to a prostitute, which is what Israel's doing. They're prostituting themselves out to the Philistines. They're marrying them and prostituting themselves out. In Judges chapter 16, verse 1, one day Samson went to a Philistine town of Gaza, and he spent the night with a prostitute. That's what it said. He spent the night with a prostitute. Verse number 2. Word soon spread that Samson was there. They're still mad that they got whooped up. So the men of Gaza gathered together and waited all night at the town gates. How long did they wait? Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor.
Neighbor.
They waited all night.
All night.
Now, because this isn't an adult-only service today, we're going to skip the part that Samson is with the prostitute. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, when the light of morning comes. This is exactly what the Philistines don't need in their life, is the light of morning. Because when the great morning sun starts to shine, when that light of Christ comes in, it's going to tear down everything that they built up. So they're waiting for something that they don't even know what they're asking for. We're going to wait till when the morning light comes, we will kill him. You couldn't do it with 3,000 men, so you figure you can do it now? Verse number 3. Samson's awesome. But Samson stayed in bed only until
midnight.
How long was he in bed till?
Midnight.
How long?
Midnight.
Midnight. He wasn't there all night long. He was only there till midnight. Then he got up, took hold of the doors of the town gate, including the 2 posts, and lifted them up, bar and all. Where are they waiting? By the town gate. Right? So this isn't like the front door of a church. Right? This is the wall to the city, the gate that keeps people out when they're under attack. He picks it up while they're all sitting there. You know they're watching them. Because they're all there. It says they're waiting there all night long. Samson shows up at midnight, lifts the gate up out of the ground, he carries it to a hill, and drops it off and says, you want to wait for me? I'm moving the battle lines over here. Right? It doesn't say that they attacked Samson at all. They saw Samson move that gate and they went home. That's what happened, right? You don't believe me, you can ask God when you get to heaven. But I'm telling you, if we're waiting to kill some dude, and he comes out and he lifts out the town gates, posts, bars, the whole, he just picks it all up and he carries it to the hill and drops it off and says, here I am, come and get me. I got other things to do. Right? Amen. That's a good spot for an amen, right?
Preach it.
The men of the city learned that he was there, and they plotted to kill him at dawn. But he arose at midnight and walked off the doors and the posts and the bar of the city gates and put them on the hill before Hiram. Sometimes you have to move the gates on the enemy. Because the enemy says, I've got something for you right here. This is where you're messing up. This is where I've got you. God cannot do nothing for you because you've got this issue with depression. You've got this issue of addiction. You've got all these problems right here. Look, I've got the gate. You can see the gate, right? It's the city gate. Right? It's not like, oh, there it is, right? You know where it is. The enemy knows where to find the gate. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, bub? I serve a great God. And when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon me, I don't have to fight my battles on your terms. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to fight it on God's terms. Right? So after his adventures with the prostitute and his wife, he found Delilah, this fine Philistine woman, who's been enlisted by some people to find out what the source of his strength is. Because the Philistines are starting to realize that they can't beat Samson on their own. Right? The dude is killing them by the thousands and moving the city gates by himself, right? We got to find out what's going on here. So here comes the haircut. Judges chapter 16, verse 4. Sometime later, Samson fell in love again with a woman named Delilah who lived in the valley of Sorek. Verse number 5, the rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how we can overpower and tie him up securely, then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. That's a buttload of money, right? Just 1,000 pieces of silver from one person today is pretty good, right? But when all these men are showing up to this lady saying, each of us is going to pay you 1,100 pieces of silver if you could just tell us the secret of Samson's power, right? That's all right. I'll do that, right? She's already in love with me. I got him wrapped around my little finger, right? This is a gold digger, right? I'm just saying. Verse number 6. So Delilah said to Samson didn't have enough to offer, obviously, right? She said to Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong, and what would it take to tie you up securely? Samson replied in verse number 7, if you tie me up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I would become as weak as anyone else. Right? Samson's a freak. I'm just saying, he's into that S&M stuff. So the Philistine rulers brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings and said, tie Samson up with them. So verse number 9, she hid some men in one of the inner rooms of her house, and she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snapped when it is burned by the fire, so the secret of his strength was not discovered. So, Samson's not revealing the secret of his strength. She's asking, what is it going to take? So I'll just tie my hands up with bowstrings that haven't been fired yet, and I'll just be as weak as the next guy. And so she cries out, Samson, the Philistines are here. They're coming to get you. What? Right? They don't hang around. They know they're about to get whooped. Right? They're out of there. So afterward, Delilah said to him in verse number 10, you have been making fun of me and telling me lies. Well, Samson's a liar. He lies to all these women all the time, right? Because Samson is a player, right? And that's what players do, is they lie to the women. So she's caught on. She's like, you've been making fun of me and telling me these lies. Now please tell me, how can you be tied up securely? Samson replied, verse number 11. If you were to tie me up with brand new ropes that had never been used, I would become as weak as anyone else. So Delilah, verse number 12, took new ropes and tied him up with them. The men were hiding in the inner room as before, and again Delilah cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson again snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thread. So at this point, Samson has got to realize there's a pattern going on here. I keep getting tied up by this crazy lady. The Philistines keep coming to attack me, and she's always asking me the same question over and over and over again. What do I got to do to get rid of your strength? And I tell her some little lie, and she does it, right? Samson might be a little retarded. Then Delilah said, because Samson broke the strings and probably kicked a couple guys on their way out the door. Verse number 13 says, you have been making fun of me and telling me lies. There appears to be a pattern forming here, Delilah, so they're all morons. Now tell me, how can you be tied up securely? Samson replied, if you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric of your loom and tighten it in the loom, I would become as weak as anyone else. So Delilah wove 7 strands of her hair into the fabric and tied him up securely. Verse number 14, she tied him with the loom. And again she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson woke up, so he's asleep, pulled back the loom, and yanked his hair away from the loom and the fabric. And then he proceeded to whoop the snot out of these guys again. Right? This is the third time this has happened. Right? Samson, give it up already. Delilah, he's not going to tell you. You talk about a dysfunctional family. Right? They got problems. Delilah, verse number 15. This is it right here. Next one, verse 15. Then Delilah did what? She did what?
Pouted.
Delilah started throwing a fit. She started pouting. How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? Which is what happens in relationships with your loved ones. Right? When you don't get your way, how can you tell me you love me? You don't even take out the trash. Right? That's all right. It's a safe place. We're all in God's house. You have made fun of me 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you strong. Verse number 6. She's about to move beyond pouting. Verse number 16. So she tormented him with her what?
Nagging.
And Samson has got a lot of nagging women in his life. She tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. Right? How long does it take for your kids to nag you before you become sick of it?
2 minutes.
Mom, dad. Can I do this? 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 No. Shut up before I kill you. Because in their mind they think, well, if I just continue persisting on, eventually they'll break down. And if we work together as a team, as brother and sister, then then we're a united front, and we'll corner one of the parents in the bedroom, like when they're coming out of the bathroom, so they can't get to the other one for moral support. And we'll just continue to nag them like this mighty army, and eventually we'll wear one of them down, right?
It works.
Right? So. Verse 16, snagged him to death. Finally, verse 17. Samson shared his secret with her. My hair has never been cut, for I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as anyone else. So Samson has now revealed the truth. And I'm not even sure if it has anything to do with his hair at all to begin with. Because the hair is not the source of the strength. God is the source of the strength. And he's revealing what he's not supposed to do. So Delilah takes advantage of that. She realized that he had finally told her the truth in verse number 18. So she sent for the Philistine rulers, come back one more time, for he has finally told me his secrets. So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands, because they understood that something was going to be different this time. All the other times they didn't show up with the money, but this time they're coming back with the paycheck. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep in verse number 19 with his head in her lap, and then she called a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. How many locks?
7.
7. Number of completion. That's God's number. The source of his strength is not in the hair, it's through God. But they come to remove the 7 locks of hair. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. She cried out in verse number 20, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. When he woke up, he thought. He doesn't know what's going on. He woke up, he thought, I will do as before and shake myself free. But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. And I wonder how many people sit in church thinking they still have the power of God, but don't realize, I'll just go through this like before, but don't realize that God has left them because they've left God. And don't even realize it. And that's a sad place to be right there. Because in Revelation it says, many will cry out, Lord, Lord, but I will say to them, I never knew you. He's not talking about the unsaved people. He's talking about the church that say, I've done these great things in your name. I cast out demons. I healed the sick. I gave to the church. I performed all these miracles in your name. And God say, I did not know you. The relationship we need with Christ is real and personal. Don't wake up one day and realize that God had left you. Verse 21, so the Philistines captured him. And then they gouged out his eyes. And they took him to Gaza, remove the gate. Right? They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. So Delilah kept persisting him. So he finally told her that if they bound him with the 7 fresh bowstrings, he would be weak as other men. She did that. She cried out. Nothing happened. Samson was able to break free. Then in response, she continued to keep asking him questions, and he continued to lie to her about the secret of his strength. And next she bound him with the new ropes and then the 7 locks of hair inside the loom. And finally she wore him down, and he told her the truth. And if someone shaved his head, that means he's now broken the vow as a Nazirite. His strength would be gone. And while Samson lay asleep in her lap and on her knees, and she, as she began to lure him to sleep by rubbing his head, and she calls in the barber. He comes in and shaves his hair, and this is the time where she cried out, "The Philistines have come to capture you!" And Samson gets up, and he realizes, without even knowing it, he's captured, and they gouge out his eyes, and they take him as a prisoner to grind grain in the city. Right, so he's chained up to the big wheel. How many have seen Conan the Barbarian? Right? When Conan starts off the movie, he's captured as a little boy, and they put him in the big circle of slaves, and they're all grinding. They're making power or something, I think, in the movie. But he's grinding wheat for our illustration. And as they die off, eventually Conan the Barbarian's the last one standing. He's the big old buff Arnold, as we all love and adore. He's pushing the grain. That's Samson's job, is to push the wheel to make the grain. Blind. So at Gaza, as Sandy makes her way up, So in Gaza, Samson was bound with bronze and was forced to grind grain in the mill, during which time his hair began to grow back. Which is what the Bible says, because that's what hair does, right? When you cut your hair, well, most of the time, right? Some of us not so much anymore, but Samson is still young enough to where when they cut his hair, it starts to grow back, right? So as he's pushing the grain, his hair starts to grow back. And there's a time when the Philistines were having this great festival in the temple of their god, Dagon, which is a fish god, right? So they're worshiping the god of fish. But we had this, Kizzy's that got her booth out this Newberry festival thing. And it's a big old hippie fest. It is. I mean, they are smoking weed at every other booth, and it's nothing but like, I've never seen so many white people play reggae music in my entire life. This is Newberry Fest. And I was sitting there, there's another pastor there who they have a booth. And we're sitting there, we're kind of talking about how it's, how crazy it is. And I just in conversation where he's complaining about the music and the drugs and all that stuff that's going on, and I said, yeah, the music sucks, right? It's not even, like, and they're doing some weird stuff. But and I was looking at him, and we're having this conversation, and I was like, and as they're up there, they're dedicating all these songs to the water and all this stuff. The water doesn't care what song you're playing for it. But I said, how cool would it be to get up on stage, even though they wouldn't appreciate it? Now this is true. This was just yesterday, and I said, how cool would it be to get up on stage and we just start busting out like a Paul and say, that water that you're worshiping, I know the one who created that water, the source of true living water, the one who gives new life. And I started preaching to the preacher about the water that they're trying to worship in this stupid festival thing. And I was like, and these are the people we need to be reaching inside the church. And he looked at me like I had lost my mind. And I'm like, what do we, we're trying to sell all this junk. What are we here for?
That's right.
Jesus did.
And I mean, you would have thought I was the weirdest person in the world. And I'm like, what I'm thinking is, how awesome would it be to get the opportunity to get up on the stage and begin to preach a message of salvation?
Amen.
And he's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, what is going on? Are we asleep and don't even realize that the power of God has left us? Now, I'd love to say that I got the opportunity to get up on stage that night and preach and people got saved, but it hasn't presented itself. But what are we here for? We're here to reach the lost, or are we here to cater to those going to heaven already and just to make their journey a little bit easier? Right? I don't know where we're going with this. Oh, because they're worshiping the fish god, right? That's where all this came from. They're worshiping the god of the fish. Samson realizes that he's come to a place in his life where his hair has been cut away. And all he's got is this leftover mullet. Samson's got a mullet, I'm just, right? Because he cut off the sides of his head and left the party in the back, right? He's at a party, right? They pull up Samson because they're going to make fun of him. Because they're like, our God gave us Samson. It took a while, but he finally got it done. And we got Samson here. We're going to parade him around. We gouged out his eyes. He can't see what's going on. And so they bring him in, and he's talking to his jailers. And he's like, I can't see. Just put my arms up on the pillars of each side of this temple so I can rest myself. And then the guards are just as dumb as everybody else, right? So I'm like, all right. So they chain him to the pillars, and Samson is now in a position like Christ was on the cross. And there's some 3,000 people plus at this party. Like, they're up there on the roof of the temple looking down to make fun of Samson. All the cool people are on the inside, all the ones that got the invite, and they're all there to mock and torment Samson. And Samson, at his request, was placed between the two pillars, and he asked the Lord, because it's no more about himself. And he asked God, he said, God, Yahweh, give me the strength one more time. Let me kill all these Philistines that are in this place right now. And Lord, you can even kill me too, because I just don't want to go on anymore. And so the Spirit of the Lord returned to Samson as he pushed against those pillars. And that temple to the false god came crashing down. Samson killed over 3,000 people in that one act, which was more than he had killed his entire lifetime, added up. He slaughtered the Philistines, who were there to make fun of him. Which brings us back to chapter 14, verse number 4. It says, his father and mother did not realize the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over the Israelites at that time. His mom and dad didn't realize that Samson's life was an opportunity. Samson himself didn't realize that he was being used as an opportunity for God's strength to be shown until the very end, when the strength of the Lord came back upon him and he pushed the pillars over, destroying the false god and the false temple, and showing Israel what God wanted for them. Which brings us, if you go back to chapter 13, verse 18, it says, why do you ask my name? It is too wonderful for you to understand. Nobody understood what God was trying to do. We stopped walking around blind, doing the tedious task of life, grinding out our own little millstones. Will you allow your eyes to be open, God's strength to infill you, so that you can be set free?